What's going on, everyone, and welcome into a brand new hour of CBS Sports HQ. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, and the NFL franchise tag deadline has officially come and gone, and now our focus shifts to free agency. Remember, our very own Pete Prisco has his list of the top 100 free agents that you can check out right now over on CBSSports.com. But let's reflect, shall we, on the players that were tagged, and there were only two, the fewest number of players tagged since 1994. KC tagged their guard Trey Smith, making him the highest paid guard in the NFL, seeing a pay increase from $3.4 million last season to $23.4 million this season as a result of that tag. And then, of course, in Cincinnati, the Bengals using the tag for the second straight season on T. Higgins, who's also getting a little bit of a salary bump as well. But let's look ahead to free agency, because many are saying that this free agency class isn't great, in large part because teams took care of their playmakers before they could hit the market. Sam Darnold is topping the list, and position value does play a factor, of course. Keep that in mind when it comes to this list for Pete. He is set to become a free agent next week, Sam Darnold, that is, and the Vikings did not use the tag. Our NFL insider Jonathan Jones saying that there is a desire to keep Sam Darnold in Minnesota. Back here on set, I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, joined by Mike Renner and Douzable. We're going to go down this list of Pete's top 100 free agents, the top 10 really, and kind of play a free agency matchmaker, starting at the top, of course, with Sam Darnold. They don't use the tag here, gentlemen. There is a desire, according to JJ, that, they want him to stay in Minnesota. Lige, I'll start with you. Do you think that he does stay there ultimately?
Ultimately, I do believe he stays there. I think this is a scenario, Jacqueline and Mike, that Sam Darnold sits back, top 5 pick, got a boatload of money coming into the NFL, and he looks, with Kevin O'Connell, I had a Pro Bowl type year. I had my best season in the NFL. So if you think about it, here's the open market. Teams like maybe the Giants or the Raiders may vie for his services. And because he didn't get tagged at the $40 million mark, they're probably not going to supersede that. So if he can work out a deal with the Minnesota Vikings to come back and bring some of that synergy back, right, the camaraderie that he has with some of those pass catchers on that offense, it makes total sense, because they have not had that the last year and a half. They've had to switch quarterbacks. Remember, Kirk Cousins got hurt halfway through last season. Then they went through a bevy of quarterbacks. Then comes Sam Darnold. If you lose Sam Darnold, you're starting over with a new quarterback again, and J.J. McCarthy. Let's not also forget, Mike, he missed his entire rookie season. So this will be like J.J. McCarthy's rookie season. You won 14 games with Sam Darnold, and you see the most touchdown passes in the first season with the new team. He's on that list right there at the bottom of it with 35. I just think it makes sense for them to work out this deal, bring some of that synergy back to the Minnesota Vikings.
If you're Sam Darnold, though, I think you want some guarantees that you're starting. He's rode the pines for years of his career, obviously. The success he had in Minnesota, his best year of his career. And obviously, if he's going to be the starter, yes, he'd love to be back there, I think. But you talk to Vikings reporters, they said that J.J. McCarthy was the guy that looked better in training camp last year as a rookie. And now 1 year later on, chances that Sam Darnold, even if he does sign back there, keeps that job, I think it's slim. I think the New York Giants are the best fit for him. They're obviously one of the most desperate. Joe Shane, Brian Dable, they need to win now to keep their job, so they need a veteran. That doesn't preclude them from drafting one, but it basically says that they're going to turn the keys over to one of these veterans, and I think Sam Darnold's the one that, if I'm them, looks the most attractive.
I would only push back and say Sam Darnold has been in the New York media.
True.
Right? You have to remember what it was like for him when he played for the New York Jets. So is he willing to go back to that New York media knowing the pressure that comes with that? Again, the rapport that he brought up with Kevin O'Connell, he had his best season. You see it right there, right? 14-2 in the first 16 games. The last 2 games they lost. But if you look at it, really the Detroit game was only on him. I don't think many quarterbacks in the NFL would have had success versus the Rams, because the offensive line was abysmal that game. That was not on Sam Darnold. That was a complete lackluster effort by the offensive line. So if you're Minnesota, if you're Sam Darnold, I think this partnership just makes a lot of sense. To your point, they did trade up one spot to get J.J. McCarthy, so he is the quarterback of the future. But if it's Sam Darnold, do you want to go potentially to a team where there's dysfunction on that team and go on this, ring around the rosy on your career again? Because we saw what happened in New York and in Carolina.
I'll just finish with this. I don't think there's going to be a massive market for him. Obviously, you look at his numbers, you look at him hitting free agency, you think, oh, all these teams are going to be beating down his door. The Browns don't have the cap space. I don't think the Titans are going to want to choose him over Will Levis. And then the Las Vegas Raiders, I think they have their sights set a little bit longer term than Sam Darnold.
I was going to say, what about the Raiders? And I also can't help but wonder, if that record in the last 2 games is a little bit different, how different this conversation, would be, even if it was just, 1-1.
Which is crazy to think, right, Jack, because it was 2 games. I would say one was his fault. The other one wasn't his fault in the playoffs. But again, what the beat on Sam Darnold has been is that he crumbles at the most inopportune time. And right, the money was on the line versus the Detroit Lions to be the #1 seed in the NFC and to win the NFC North, and he crumbled.
All right, gentlemen, we have a lot of free agents to get through, so we're going to alternate here, and we're starting with the Eagles' Josh Sweat, who led the team in sacks during the regular season with 8, was a little quiet in the playoffs, and then had a really impressive showing in the Super Bowl. What could the market look like for him, Lige?
Jacqueline, talk about getting hot at the right time, right? 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl for Josh Sweat. I think he's going to have a robust market. I mean, the crazy thing is, he's still only 27, Mike. Yeah, I feel like he's been in the NFL forever, and you see his rankings last year or in the postseason when you talk about the Eagles in the 2024 season. But 2.5 sacks by himself in the Super Bowl dominated Joe Thuney. I think a team like the New England Patriots make a lot of sense for Josh Sweat. They have to build it the right way in the trenches on the offense and defensive line. Their leading sack getter last year was Dietrich Wise with 5. That's not going to get it done in the NFL. Bring in a veteran guy like Josh Sweat who has championship experience, who knows how to do it the right way. I think he would mesh really well with Mike Vrabel and the Patriots.
All right, we know that the Patriots do have a lot of money to spend as well. They have like the most cap space in the NFL. Let's go to the Ravens. We're talking about Ronnie Stanley, Mike, and this is someone who has dealt with injuries in the past. He did play the full 2024 season, which you have to think if he's going into free agency, maybe that had something to do with it. But what are some landing spots that come to mind for you?
I know the Ravens would love to have him back, but Ronnie Stanley's probably looking at this free agent group and saying there's not a lot of great tackles, but there's a lot of teams that need tackles, and thinking he could probably name his price once he hits the open market. And if he can name his price, I think it's the New England Patriots are going to be the team that's willing to pay it. They have $127 million in cap space. They have to outlay about $80 million of that just to hit the cap floor. And let me tell you, there ain't no players on that roster that I'm re-signing right now for the New England Patriots, so it's going to have to be free agents. So obviously you have Drake May. Everyone talked about how bad their offensive line was. It was atrocious last year. Ronnie Stanley, at least in pass protection, would be a massive, massive upgrade. Yeah, it's a little stopgap. He's 31 years old heading into this season, so it's a 2 or 3 year deal, something in that range. But that's 2 or 3 years of his rookie contract. That should be that prime years of Drake May trying to win a championship.
Yeah, and Drake May, that's your quarterback of the future, so you got to protect him, right? Let's talk about Milton Williams. And Lige, Pete was saying he may be one of the most underrated players on the Eagles defense, and he could be in line for a huge payday. Do you agree with that? And who could give him that payday?
He got hot at the right time, too. He had 2 sacks in the Super Bowl, a couple other pressures. I remember that was Mike unsung hero going into Super Bowl week. 5 sacks in the regular season. I got him going to the Cardinals. Let's not forget his former defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, now the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. They need pass rush in the worst way. Now, they took Robinson last year out of Missouri, missed the first 11 games, actually came on strong towards the back end. I love the pairing of those two because Robinson, even though he's an end by trade, you can kick him inside on 3rd down. Him and Milton Williams will create havoc up the middle. You see what he did right there in the Super Bowl. Sack, fumble, got the ball back for his defense. I think meeting up with his former defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, and the Cardinals make a lot of sense.
A lot of free agents that we're talking about for the Eagles. They might be losing to other teams.
But they're losing players.
Yes. All right, let's talk about Drew Dalman, because this guy was limited to 9 games last season because of an ankle injury. And, Mike, you have him going to Chicago, which is interesting considering the recent turn of events that we've seen there in Chi-Town.
Yeah, I don't think they're done. Like, you saw how bad that offensive line was last year. And you know Ben Johnson and what he wants to do. They want to run the football. That was the impetus of that Detroit Lions offense. That makes everything else go. So now you have your guards in place. You just traded for them the last 2 days. You put Drew Dalman in the center of that. It's one of the best run-blocking interior offensive lines in the NFL. All of a sudden, it's just that left tackle position, which I think a lot of people have them penciled in for the draft, but they could be players for Ronnie Stanley as well because they got the cap space. They got Ryan Poles trying to save his job and make things better really quickly. So Drew Dalman, shout out to Kyle Long. He loves this fit. I do.
Of course he does. Let's talk about DJ Reed. And Lige, we're going to come to you because this is a Jets organization, a new regime, a new head coach in Aaron Glenn. They've been doing, a lot of cleaning of the house, if you will. So DJ Reed, top landing spots for him, and I'm guessing it's not sticking there.
I would love it. I just think his market's going to be robust. He was one of the bright spots for the defense for the New York Jets last year. I think the Commanders make a lot of sense. You pair him with Mike Sanders still. Let's not forget, Marshall Lattimore, yes, he's under contract, but none of that money's guaranteed anymore. $18 million. We saw when they traded for him, he struggled to stay healthy and even stay on the field. And actually had some struggles on the field as well. You talk about a feisty get after you corner. That is exactly what DJ Reed is. You see him willing to make tackles in the open space. Few corners in the league want to do that. DJ Reed is scrappy, not the biggest guy, but he will compete his tail off. Play in and play out will fit in perfectly with the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, we've seen the Commanders doing a lot of moves recently, of course, and Deebo Samuel comes to mind as well. Let's talk about Jevon Holland because, Mike, he's coming off of a lower year by his standards, certainly, but what do you think the market could look like for him?
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Miami Dolphins, I can't imagine letting him get away after letting Christian Wilkins get away last year. That's like the dream scenario when you draft guys, with top 50 draft picks. But there's a cap situation that I do think he's going to get away. And the team I'm highlighting is Minnesota Vikings because the team that drafted him, or the coach that drafted him, Brian Flores, now the DC of the Minnesota Vikings, and he loves versatile safeties. He loves safeties in general. They play 3 of them. He would fit in the shoes of Harrison Smith. Ideally, the guy can wear a lot of different hats on your defense. He's played slot, he can play deep, he can play box. He's one of the best safeties in the NFL. You add him to that mix with the defense that has a lot of impending free agents themselves, the Minnesota Vikings, I think he elevates that team.
And to that point, Mike, Cam Bynum is going to be a free agent. Harrison Smith is getting up there in 2.
I think he's retired.
Exactly. So Jevon Holland makes a lot of sense. The guy that actually drafted him, actually, when you talk about his best tape, it's probably his rookie year with Brian Flores. So it makes a lot of sense him going to the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, we were just talking about the Eagles losing a bunch of guys, and then, the Vikings said, hold my beer, look at all the free agents that we have coming up. Let's talk about Zach Baun, and this is a guy that signed a 1-year deal with Philly, moved from outside to inside linebacker, took a risk on himself, Lige, and it worked out for him. Based off what we saw the last season, 150 tackles, what landing spots come to mind?
The all-pro Zach Baun. And this will be interesting, Mike and Jack, because I wonder what the market's going to be like for him, because a lot of times in the NFL, they want to see it more than 1 year. Right now, could he have a market kind of like Josie Jewell? Because Josie Jewell was around his age when he went to Carolina last year, and he got $6 million per year. I think Josie Jewell's turning 31 this year. Zach Baun throughout the season will turn 29. Or will he get a Logan Wilson type deal, which is eclipses $9 million? That'll be the interesting thing. I actually have him pairing up with Josie Jewell for the Carolina Panthers. They were abysmal against the run, and Zach Baun helps you from day one against the run. This dude was a tackling machine. It'll be interesting, again, to see where his market is. Let's not forget, they just let Shaq Thompson test the market. They released him, so they're thin at linebacker right now, and Josie Jewell's coming off a major injury as well. I think Zach Baun to the Carolina Panthers make a lot of sense.
I think this is the one guy, though. We talked about a lot of Eagles. I think the Eagles got to resign this guy. I think he's the heartbeat of that defense in the middle, and a Vic Fangio scheme, that Mike linebacker, a very important position. I think you got to resign him. All
right, finally, we're going to put a bow on this segment and talking about the wide receivers, right? Talking about Chris Godwin, because there's a lot of veteran wide receivers that are in this free agency class, including him, and he was having a great 2024 season until the injury. Mike, what teams could be a fit when it comes to Chris Godwin?
He's going to have a lot of suitors because he's like the only guy out there. There's not a lot of guys available in this free agency class. Obviously, he's coming off that ankle injury, but the team that I keep hearing is the team that you just gave Zach Baun to. It's the Carolina Panthers. They have unreliable wide receivers at this point in time. They had the 7th highest drop rate, Bryce Young did, of any quarterback in the NFL. Chris Godwin, he didn't drop a single pass last year. 50 catches, no drops over the course of his career, 4.2% drop rate. So this guy, great hands, super reliable. Another veteran, kind of like the Adam Thielen signing, but like a few years earlier, still has some juice left that Thielen didn't in Carolina. So I like this fit because, well, they need to get a wide receiver badly there in Carolina.
Yeah, and we saw, Bryce Young start to figure some stuff out down the stretch, so that could be a good fit. Mike, we can hear you. And Lige, you're a friend of the show with Kyle Long pushing the pile. What can we look forward to, Mike?
We had a free agency preview this week, did a little capology, go through all the guys' questions on the cap, and then next week, well, we'll be breaking down all the free agent signings all week long.
All right, just a few days after we saw Kansas City tag Trey Smith, they are making him the highest paid guard in the NFL. They send Joe Thuney to Chicago. So what is Kansas City thinking with their O-line, especially after we saw Pat Mahomes get sacked a whole lot in the Super Bowl? The guys are sticking around to discuss on the other side.